This wasn't one of those drive-through births. It was also the incubator, the couple decades or more leading up to the even the use of the word conservation. Those ideas were incubating in Milford and at Gray Towers. And it was also the nursery, in that once Teddy Roosevelt and Gifford Pinchot launched that first conservation movement, this was still the focus of a lot of things. People were still coming and going, and throughout that whole early era, the town of Milford was really pretty vibrant with that early conservation activity. And many of those things are still here, like Henry Graves' house, the second chief of the Forest Service, is in town. Very few people know that. So we're pretty proud of all that. Gifford Pinchot, of course, was the first chief of the Forest Service, pretty much the founding chief of the Forest Service, and he and Teddy Roosevelt were really the brains behind the first conservation movement back around the turn of the century. In '63, JFK was in town, one of the 5 presidents, and basically gave Gray Towers to the American people and entrusted the management with the Forest Service. And so we've been there working with what to do with it and how to fit it into the community and the rest of the world since '63. We underwent a major rehab that finished up. I found with rehabs there is no end date. We're still finishing up little things. But it was, for the most part, done 4 or 5 years ago. And more than a few $1 million went into really restoring Gray Towers to how it looked mostly in the 20s when Gifford was governor. A lot of people still call it the governor's house. They don't know anything about the conservation part. They just know he was governor. He was, of course, governor from 23 to 27 and from 31 to 35. Made some pretty significant contributions to conservation in Pennsylvania, but also a lot of other major accomplishments. One of which was get the farmers out of the mud. And they still call a lot of the roads around, I'm sure you've all heard the term Pinchot roads. You probably have driven on one already today, or will before the day's over, especially if you go on the tour. So we were positioned there at the end of the rehab to really start doing more with Gray Towers, and we have. Over the last 3 or 4 years since the rehab's done, we've really started interpreting and using Gray Towers to be more a part of the community. With the rehab, we did get, among the many millions of dollars that were amassed from federal, state, private, foundation, all kinds of sources came together to do that rehab, with a lot of help from the community of Milford. There was no one sector that could have put that together. I think in those days there was a little money around. Now it would be hard to do that, I think. But the various sectors came together and really did a great job on the rehab, including PennDOT came through to build on the legacy of the Pinchots to getting the farmers out of the mud. And you'll see our new entrance and our new parking lot, the new pavilion that PennDOT was a big partner on. So we appreciate all those connections. In the time since that rehab's been done, we've seen a lot of major changes at Gray Towers, and trying to make use of all the efforts that have gone into it. And most of those are concerned with connecting with the community. Richard Nachman's here from the Gray Towers Heritage Association. They have formed here recently, and they're basically their sole job in life is to connect Gray Towers more closely with the community. And we've seen a lot of that happen here recently in a whole lot of different ways. Already a few have been mentioned here. We're excited about the Pinchot Greenway happening. There is some economic impact of Gray Towers. Currently it's being used as primarily as a natural resource leadership development center, mostly for the Forest Service, but for all natural resource agencies. Last year, we're up now to where we had about 1,000 nights in the area from natural resource professionals staying here and doing leadership development at Gray Towers. And that is something that's just growing exponentially as we speak. Those people view Milford and Gray Towers as Mecca for, certainly for the Forest Service. It's the place where it all started, and we'd like to see it as not only the place where the first conservation movement started, but where the second one continued, and where the third one is percolating. And we're spending a lot of time working with current and future leaders in natural resources to try to percolate that out. In the last few years, the public visitation has increased significantly, and we're not big enough to be a substantial destination from all that far away for too many people, but when you can put it with all the other things going on in Milford, I think you've got some critical mass there that's certainly a lot of fun for us, and a big opportunity for us to get in some pretty significant messages on the history of conservation and the evolution. In 2004, the Gray Towers National Historic Site Act was passed through Congress, and that made a few changes. Gray Towers had been a National Historic Landmark for a long time, but in the Site Act in 2004, it also became part of a National Historic Site, which gave us some tools to use, and we're still learning how to use them. But it also, I think, recognized that Gray Towers isn't just Gray Towers, and it doesn't just happen to be adjacent to Milford, that it's Milford's that's that birthplace of that first conservation movement. The Site Act expanded from seeing Gray Towers as a landmark to seeing Gray Towers as part of a site, and then it mentions associated properties, including Forest Hall that Reggie was talking about in another context a little while ago, and the community house that you'll see. And it's really, you can't separate the birth of conservation from the town of Milford. Gray Towers was a big part of that, but Milford itself was. So we're still learning to use the authorities and the opportunities the Site Act gave us. It certainly exempted us from a lot of bureaucracy and restrictions, and gives us a chance to really create our own future, which we're doing. Another change that we've seen here recently is the connection with the community, helped a little bit, more than a little bit, by the Heritage Association, but also an effort for us to connect with, instead of doing our own programs, what we try to do whenever we can now is connect with community programs. We're proud to be a venue for the film festival. If there's a music festival or anything in town, we like being a venue in that instead of doing separate kind of programs. The programming at Gray Towers has tripled, the number of programs has tripled in the last 3 or 4 years. And that trend line, I think, is still going up. The involvement from the community is pretty incredible. The volunteer efforts, with the shrinking of federal budgets, we're, like a lot of organizations, a bit cash-strapped, and we couldn't operate at this point without the community volunteers that come out. We have significant people coming out who are leading tours, and yesterday I looked at some carpentry, and someone was volunteering to fix chairs. The garden club comes out and is responsible for keeping, when you drive by, you'll see gardens in pretty amazing shape. Mostly that's volunteers from the Milford Garden Club coming out and working on that. So we're inseparable from the community at this point, and really glad of it.